Hello and welcome to the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. My name is Sam Hind, and today I am joined by a very special guest. It's rare to find somebody who is so incredibly passionate about this industry and has stuck with it for as many years as this beautiful person who will be joining me today. Today, I'm going to introduce you to Michele McDonough. Michele is a powerful influencer in the direct selling industry with a wealth of experience of over 45 years. From being in the industry herself as a distributor, through to being in corporate teams, and now as co-founder of C3 Executive Search, she supports both of those areas. She works with leaders in the field as well as corporate teams. She's also the co-founder of the Women's Power Circle. And as you will get from listening to this interview, she is incredibly passionate, as I am, about what this industry is, how it helps people, and where, most importantly, it's going. Michele shares her breadth of experience, her knowledge, and her wisdom in this episode. From a corporate perspective, if you want to hear a little bit more about what's going on in the field, what she's seeing from corporate teams, and where this industry is headed, you absolutely want to listen to this episode. And of course, if you're a leader in the field and you want to know a little bit more about what's going on, I highly recommend you tune on in. So grab yourself a cup of tea or coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Well, hello there and welcome back into the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. I'm joined by the amazing Michele McDonough. Welcome on in, Michele. It's so great to have you joining us today.
Hi from California.
I love this. I love the fact that we get to do this from afar, and you're on the other side of the globe. You're on the other side of the day as well, but amazing how technology allows us to have this chat. So I'm really grateful to have you here.
Yes, amazing. And it's amazing that we can coordinate all this. That's great.
Yeah, I can't say we did it well. We've had so many backs and forwards with the time zones, but we made it. And I'm so excited for this chat. I know this is going to be a really powerful talk, Michele. We had the pleasure of meeting a little while back, and you have got so much amazing experience, knowledge, and understanding for this incredible industry. And, you know, obviously you are co-founder of C3 Executive Search, which we've already talked about, but you're also a veteran of this industry. You've got over 45 years of experience in direct selling. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background so our listeners know just a little bit more about you before we get stuck in?
Absolutely. And I always want to make a disclaimer. I started super, super young because 45 sounds like a lot. I just adore this channel, and I started, of course, when I was very young. And the way that I came into this channel was via the sales field. I was working my way towards leadership with a party plan jewelry direct selling company a million years ago, and I just loved what this industry did for women. And you know, I was in the beauty industry prior, and you know, there are a lot of companies, a lot of channels, a lot of industries, but there's something different about this industry, and the strength and the power it just gives to families, and especially women working from home. So I grew up in this channel. I was lucky enough to kind of cross the line over into the corporate world at a young age in my career, and then I've been in the corporate world of direct selling the rest of my life. So, and now I'm doing as a partner, co-founder, C3 Executive Search. And the reason I love what I do now is because all the relationships over the last 45 years I've created and really magnified come into play with what I do. So when a client comes and they want the best of the best of the best, you know, my partner and I, we know how to find that person, and we have our relationships that help us. So, and we stay very active in the channel. That makes us different from other executive search firms, you know, DSU, DSA, and everything going on out there.
So, Michele, you and I have got a very similar background. I feel like we have got much in common because Like you, I started in this industry at literally 14. That was my first direct selling business. And we've already had this chat, but the funny thing is that my first experience with direct selling was actually at 7. I remember I grew up alone with my dad. And so when I got to that age where it was time to start, doing the girly thing, and I started to show some interest in makeup, my mum, who once upon a time was actually a Mary Kay consultant, had left behind all of these beautiful palettes of makeup, Mary Kay makeup, and some videos. And I grew up teaching myself how to do makeup by watching these VHS tapes by Mary Kay teaching their consultants how to do makeup artistry. So this industry was kind of, showed me how to be a woman in many ways.
Yeah. Well, and your story is kind of common. We come across a lot of very powerful executive CEOs that were raised by Herbalife parents or raised by Mary Kay parents, so they knew as a child growing up what that meant. And so, yeah.
And, things have changed a lot over the last, I'm not going to say how old I am, but let's go with the last 30 to 40 years, let alone, since this industry started. But just the last 5 years has been a significant shift, a significant change. What do you currently observe as being, because you're so connected with so many companies, you get to see the field as well as the corporate end. What do you see as being some of the biggest, or observing as the biggest challenges right now in 2023 for both, companies and their distributors alike?
Well, this industry changes every day, and because of COVID, it just changed tremendously, and it's changing this week and next week, and so that's why it's so important to keep current, because what was popular 3 months ago is not popular now. But I would say, and I actually made a list. As you probably aware of, compensation plans, whatever way the field is incentivized or paid or whatever, is changing dramatically over to affiliate programs, and cutting back from the you do this, you do that, and 5 levels here and this and that. So it's become more simplified, so people are not as confused when they come into the business. And the process of onboarding employees, I mean, you talk about the last couple of years working remotely. There are executives who can't work remote. They're used to a physical team. And so that's been a real shift. And then the managers managing a team that is in another state via Zoom. And so they're having issues. So that whole process has changed. And of course, now in the last couple of weeks, a British company did a big study showing that 4-day work weeks create more productivity and less stress. So now we're looking at a different work week. And so a lot of companies are asking their employees to come back because they feel the culture has been affected without having these people here. And then, of course, we're going digital, paper, brochures and whatever, everything is just going digital. So it's easier. Social media has played a big role, and with social media you got to look at the legalities, because you can get yourself in trouble, and so that's become an issue as well. And cultures are changing. Companies are, they start 20 years ago, they have a good family story, and with COVID and with employees working in other states and distributors kind of alone in one area and whatever, it's just everything is changing. So the key is really keeping up with all these changes. And not a lot of people like change. So
No. And I can see this as a big challenge at the moment. It's interesting to see, you mentioning about our corporate teams working in different locations, and we're noticing a lot more of that now, where particularly in the US, you can have people spread out all over the country, and in many cases, we're seeing people that have never met one another. So they're working for the same company. They've started within the last 3 years, and because they're working, from home, they don't know the rest of the team that they're working with, and it is a whole new dynamic, isn't it?
That for some employees is very difficult, and
Yeah.
the leader of that team has to strategically
Yeah.
fit that all together, and that's hard. And I think leaders have been learning new ways to manage remote teams, and and again, as I said earlier, not a lot of people like working alone, and then there's the group of people that love it, and
Isn't
so
it? Isn't it in so many ways, though, just thinking about this, it replicates what direct selling is, in that the corporate teams are now almost mirroring in many ways the field, because
yes.
that is the challenge that leaders have of their teams in the field and have had for a long time. Now we're seeing that same dynamic in a corporate environment.
Exactly. And good point, Sam, you brought that up, because I think companies, I'm hoping they realize that they can use what they gain with the employees also with the field. And it's definitely, and when we've placed candidates, executives, I should say, that have never met the team or the owners of the companies. So, there was a time when travel was absolutely forbidden. So everything was done, via Zoom. And there's a little bit of a physical relationship on Zoom, but
Mm.
there were times when people made hires and they've never met them in person. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. Look, I've got a question that I'm
sure.
going to ask you. Given all of your experience in the industry, you've had direct selling businesses, you've then worked for corporate teams, you've observed and you've been around for such a long time. And I don't mean that to come out of the way, but your experience
Yeah.
is so I guess broad in this industry. You've had both sides. If you were to start your own business now, so if you were to go back into the field and be a direct seller in this day and age, this time, given all of the shifts that we've had from when you were last in the industry, what would your main focus be right now to grow a business yourself?
Well, I mean, we do grow our business ourselves, my partner and I, in what we do now. So we are doing the same things as a sales field would do, but it's really in today's business, it's really about the consumer. So it was always about the distributors, and we've made a big shift to the consumer focus, direct to consumer and whatever. So I would, if I went back out in the field and wanted to work my way up to leadership, I'd have to really build a business based on the trends today and what it's going to look like in 5 years, because it's not the same it was. And we do run across executives that we kind of call legacy executives that have been around a long time. And they're very used to doing things, the way they did it 30 years ago. And
Yeah.
it's
There's a lot of
really,
pushback to change, isn't there?
yeah. And it's really, and it worked 30 years ago, but
Yeah.
they come in and try to, and it's really kind of a shift, and, for everybody, because it worked great then, but it
Mm.
probably work today. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of which, you've just mentioned the shift over the next 5 years, and I want to talk to you about the demographic shift in a moment. But what do you foresee coming? What changes are you preparing for both your clients and also you as a company? How do you see this industry changing in the next 5 years?
well, as I mentioned, the areas that are changing dramatically, companies are trying very hard to stay on top of what's right, what's wrong, what other companies tried, what failed, what are new companies doing that is working, and holding on to the story, holding on to their culture. And so it's very scary for a lot of companies, and legalities. We've always got government agencies keeping an eye on our channel, so you got to be super careful about what you do. And so it's really, really tough, and but you got to stay ahead of the curve. So as I mentioned, it's all about the consumer. It's making that shift and making consumer programs work, and that consumer journey, whether shopping through the shopping cart, what that looks like, everything. It's got to be state of the art and innovative and new, because it's that when they shop, it's very different than when they shopped in the back office or through a shopping cart or whatever. So everything is changing. So,
Yeah.
and it's important to listen to the field. I think that I've always believed in advisory boards that included, your top leadership, maybe a tech area and a new product area and a comp plan area, and get their insights, and you have to balance it as a company. Sometimes it's not good, it's more pro the sales field, but you got to find that nice balance and take the feedback and, and listen to what they need and how, how they need support. So.
And I notice more and more you talk about listening to the field, the disconnect that we see between, and between corporate and the field. I think that a lot of what is assumed by head offices is needed by the field, in not all cases, but in many cases is quite different. And you think about it, back when I had my first business in this industry, it was paper orders. I remember getting all of the products sent to my house, and I used to package it all up and I used to deliver it all by hand. It was very hands-on. And in so many ways, that's what made the industry beautiful, because it was so connected and so intimate and so relationship-based.
Yeah.
But now, whilst we've got the convenience of online, we have to find ways to make that connection in other ways. And we're seeing a lot of people in the field using that convenience to disconnect. And that's not what the industry is about. And it's causing, I really believe it's causing a shift where our industry is losing in many ways what makes it so special.
Right. No, and I totally get what you're saying. The Avon days and the Mary Kay days where you a little bag at the front door, and it's really trying to stay very personalized to your consumer. I buy my clothes, my makeup, my skincare, my vitamins, everything, jewelry, everything I do is direct selling. And I do have a couple distributors that will call and check on if I need something or, and they just send it to me in a gorgeous, container bag with a little note and a little chocolate and here's what's coming up in the next 2 or 3 months as far as specials. So that so personalizes the experience. And it's kind of ironic. Back in the day with Avon, ringing the doorbell. And I think if you did it today, you'd risk getting shot. You got to be careful and you don't know, And
I don't know. In so many ways, I really miss that side of it. And I think if I went back into the industry, it's really funny because people say to me, look, I teach social media. That's my job. I teach social media to the direct selling industry. But if I were to go back into the industry now, I would do as much face-to-face and as much personal connection and contact as I possibly could. I wouldn't be using social media as a primary tool. I'd be using it as a tool to complement that. But I think I'd be going back to that face-to-face, and what you were talking about, that element of getting something in the mail that's personal is so powerful, and yet I think so underrated by corporate as much as the field. And, I know that from a corporate perspective, we're looking at simplifying and streamlining because we want to reduce costs. We want to increase, orders. We want to, take away the barriers. But by doing that, we're also reducing that relationship building opportunity as well. And it's just a difficult balance. And I really sense that that's a challenge at the moment.
It is tough. And when you start out in an industry and did things a certain way and then it's changed. But I always believe I love bringing people together and having a little party and whatever, that physical connection. And everybody is actually, the excitement level is so high, they're selling each other. You don't have to do anything really. And I think at some level, parts of the country, obviously with COVID, it's different, but it's obviously better now. But, in the Midwest, the kind of in the central part of the country, people are still doing that. They live in smaller communities. They all know each other. And And what I've always, when I was consulting, what I always liked doing was creating some sort of a philanthropy program where all of these distributors in these little towns could pick a place every month, whether March of Dimes or cerebral palsy or muscular dystrophy, something in their community. And then the company would send the check to the distributor, and then the distributor would go make the donation, and they'd be in the front page of the local newspaper. But it gave them so much power because they were so community driven. And parts of the country are doing that. COVID kind of threw everybody off, but yet I do think I do think a lot of areas really didn't wear masks like the bigger cities did. And so they just went on with life and whatever. So, but that it is a different, you're having a digital relationship or a social media relationship. It is very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think your product has a lot to do with it. It's different. Where I buy my cosmetics, she kind of puts the colors on her hands, and she does that big visual thing, and so it is very different when you're doing all that online. So the product, of course, is drives how you do that. So
of course. And so let's just talk about the demographic, because you and I have had a conversation about the demographic shift over the last few years. Let's just have a bit of a chat about that. How do you feel the demographic is changing, and how do distributors adapt to this? Because we've got, you talked before about the people that don't want to change because they've been doing it the same way for 30 years, but we're seeing a big shift of, the Gen Zs and the millennials, et cetera. Well, millennials are kind of old. I feel like we can't call them the newbies anymore, but the Gen Zs, et cetera, coming through. And, what does that mean for distributors now? Because it's a very different ballgame, very different expectation.
Well, studies show, and if you think about it, studies show that we recruit and sell to like people. So I'm a baby boomer. I get along better and work better with baby boomers. For me to go to a Gen Z and maybe a millennial, whatever, a millennial might be easier, but they talk different, they communicate different. You have to approach them different. The words you use are different with a Gen Z. So and it's always difficult, because when I worked with clients and we kind of did studies, somebody in their 50s, they their whole organization was basically like people like them, their downline or their group. They didn't go out and try to get a 22-year-old and whatever. So to widen, companies are trying to go deep and wide. They're trying to get everybody, and you communicate different with each particular age group. So they've got to be texting or content or digital or conference calls or live Zoom calls, whatever. So you got to kind of do a little bit of everything to reach everybody. And if you don't, and if you stay the same way, they won't shop with you. I forgot which generation. I think it was Gen X, where they're very driven by charity, philanthropy. And if they don't see that a company gives back to their community, they go somewhere else. So you got to kind of know, and
and that's so very true. I guess the thing with distributors is there's a very different focus there. Like, a distributor is going to need to identify who they best communicate with and really niche down on that. Because if you try to be who you're not, if you try to connect with people that you're not put here to connect with, you're going to fail miserably. You'll dislike what you do in your business, and it's not going to work. But from a corporate perspective, and I know, we'll talk about this in a moment. I know from my perspective, what I'm hearing on the ground, and when I'm speaking with, corporate head offices, the question that comes up more often than not is, how do we reach more of the younger demographics? Because at the moment, we're geared up to reach these groups, but we recognize and understand that we need a younger demographic coming through for the longevity of the business. And that's a really good point you make, Michelle, that it's about having those different ways to communicate and those different ways of branding yourself so that you are tailoring to all those different age groups, because we're talking very different needs, very different values. Yeah, absolutely. Those different channels as well. There are demographics that prefer to do everything online and just have it delivered, but that
Exactly.
means a very different messaging too.
Well, and I think when you and I spoke, you wanted me to say something. I when I talk to someone the first time or going to talk to them, I ask, what's your preference? Texting, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
IM, Zoom, or a regular old-fashioned phone call? And so I let them pick, because what I like doesn't mean that they're going to like it. So
Yeah, that's such a good point.
and it helps the relationship. But to your point about digging deep and digging wide, with your consumer base, you gotta find that younger, whatever, Gen X, Gen Z, and they will go out and build their Gen Z group. So it really only takes stepping over to find one person, because they're going to bring that group in. And one thing I liked about Origami Owl many, many, many years ago, Chrissy did this great program, and I think they still do it, mother-daughter program.
Mm-hmm.
The mother would sign the contract, because the daughter could be 16, 17, underage. So the parent signed the contract, because you have to be 18. But they did the business together. So it was the business coming in, and it was the partnership with a mother-daughter and their jewelry. So mom was having fun and the daughter was having fun, and she had her group, and they both made money together. And more importantly, it was a bonding experience. So really, really like that concept.
Yeah, that's such a clever concept. I love that idea. Maybe we can get some more people taking that one on. I feel like that's, as a mum myself now of a teen, I've actually, we've talked about this. The problem is, I'm not aligned with any company, nor can I be, because of our relationship with the DSA, and we want to keep it that way. But I was like, if I could be back in the industry, I would do it with my daughter. We'd do it together, and we'd have some fun with that. So it's such a clever idea. I love that.
Well, even men I know a company tried, I forgot what they were selling, father son. There was something they were following in stride with the father son version, but it really supported the family. And I think thinking outside the box for things like that, you just got to figure out how to do that. And going and finding, where do you find a younger generation that like Cutco, that needs money in college, and of course their demographic is college kids, because they do that to pay for their schooling. So that's the market they went after. So
yeah. So speaking of, you are obviously speaking a lot with corporates and leaders in the field. Let's start with corporates. Given your experience, what are you hearing on the ground at the moment from, corporate head office teams in the industry?
Well, I mean, it's all change, and it's all about just owning the change and not being scared of it, and constantly being updated with editorials. And we have some great events going on out there, and one coming out in April. And boy, the knowledge and the intel you can gain. And what's so beautiful about this channel is people will be on stage and say, I made a mistake. I did this. And that way other companies, if they're doing that, they stop or they learn, whatever. But people on this channel are not afraid to help others and share. And so even when you're in the hallway at these events, you can learn something powerful. And but it's really all about technology. To your point, keeping that warmth in the technology, keeping those relationships. How do you, I guess it's called gamification, how do you reward a distributor? Is that these big, robust comp plans, or is it something simple and easy? And, do you pay daily? Do you pay weekly? Instant gratification? So it's really just keeping up. And that's why I always say, create advisory boards and listen to your sales field. And I think you'll get your best ideas from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the sales field, what are you hearing from leaders in the field at the moment? And how does that differ from what what's coming from head office?
Well, I interviewed two of my good friends. I said I was doing this podcast, and I said, tell me from a leader point of view, not a corporate point of view, what's going on. And their comments were the same. It has changed. You got to study and work and go with the change. And both of these people, I would say 45 up, and so they were not, they had to learn how to use technology. It was a little different than what they were used to. So they're out there and doing reels. They're doing things that they never thought they would be doing, and their business is doing well. So it's really learning on what's needed and doing it. And it's scary. And you get to these baby boomers, and sometimes technology is kind of, scary.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. The thing is though, and this is, we saw people embracing it over COVID, and we saw people say, hey, I've got a choice to make. I'm going to lose my business, or I learn what I don't know. And I finally embraced the technology. And I don't know if you saw this, but I certainly did. I felt like a proud mum watching so many people step into that. But as soon as things loosened up, we saw another separation of groups. We saw the group that went, I'm going to take what I've learned and I'm going to grow on this. And we saw another group of people going, I'm going to go back to what I was comfortable with. And I'm just going to put to the side all those things I had to do and I had to learn because it just felt uncomfortable. And we're seeing that growth happening for actually a much smaller group of people at the moment, because our toughest time has not been during COVID. It's been on the other side of COVID. It's that small group of people who have gone, I'm going to take what I was learning and I'm going to build on that. And I'm going to stay in that discomfort, particularly that group that are sort of 35 plus really, that didn't grow up like you and I. We didn't grow up with technology at our fingertips. I think the most I learned at school, Michelle, was how to send a Hotmail, how to set up a Hotmail email and send an email. And I learned that in year 12. So when it comes to technology, everything that you and I and anyone our age and up knows is essentially self-taught.
Yeah.
But there's a difference I'm seeing between the group of people that say, I'm going to embrace that, even if it makes me uncomfortable, or I'm going to stick with what I know and the world should adapt to me. And of course, their businesses are not doing well.
Exactly. And, when you bring, and I still think I'm the only AOL person out there in the world. I'm still, on AOL, but I do think that from our point of view, C3 Executive Search, because of COVID, a lot of employees refuse to go back to the office, and they will not take the job or they'll quit. And that's huge because they were in the corporate environment for so long, and now they find they want to be home with the kids and the dog. And so companies are dealing with that too. So
So given the what you've been listening to, what you've been hearing and seeing, and the experience that you have, and obviously you've got amazing experience from a HR perspective, a hiring perspective, and you're seeing new teams coming in. We've seen a lot of new people come into play in the corporate environment over the last few years. What tips could you provide, given your experience, for building and supporting team in 2023?
Well, that's a good question. I could probably talk about that for an hour, but and I'm still learning myself. And my partner and I are very good at grasping what's working, and so we try to share that with the next client. But we do have a client that we so admire. In fact, we brought them to the last DSA event, the HR department, and had them mingle and talk about what they're doing. But the onboarding process is like unlike any other company. And there's this wonderful culture because of the HR department and a great job at interviewing. I'll tell you, they know how to find the right person. And interviewing is tough. A lot of people make bad decisions through the interview process, but they've got it down pat. And I'll tell you, this HR person has been there over 30 years. The longevity in this company, they should be on stage talking about what they do because they do it right.
Yeah.
But there's a process, and there was a period of time a couple of years ago when companies were doing uh, uh, Myers-Briggs, I say that correctly, all these personality tests,
Yeah.
365, and it would bring out certain personality traits, but we weren't sure if that really applied to what they were doing. It was just like, okay, this person gets up early and so it just, it's finding that process has to be perfected, because it's so costly. When someone quits and they rehire, someone quits and they rehire, they gotta do it right the first time. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, I think we could have a whole other conversation about hiring. And I'm really fascinated actually by this process, because I think it's as much about getting the right person for your team as it is about a person joining the right team. And there's just, it's an amazing cultural dynamic, I suppose. And when you get it right, it's got a ripple effect, but you can get it
wrong.
Strong.
Yeah.
Also has a ripple effect.
Exactly. Very so to your point and my point, when you do it wrong, and I remember a lot of positions. I was always kind of VP of sales and higher. I was focused on the field, and you don't want to make mistakes, especially in that role, because that person is taking your business and your culture out to the field and really bonding with the field, and you don't want leaders getting upset or having so you got to be sensitive, and there's an art to it. Not everybody can do it. So
yeah, absolutely. There is certainly an art to it. And so I've got a couple of fun questions I want to ask you now, Michele. These are my favorite, and I'm really keen to hear, what is your favorite book for our accelerated book list?
Well, I wrote that down here. It's Managing from the Heart. And I used this book 25 years ago. I checked, it's still on Amazon, Managing from the Heart. It's a good book for leadership. It's how to be heart-centric. And we tend to let egos and all sorts of things get in the way. And when you manage from the heart, you develop a team, because you can pick and choose who your team is. So you can create a healthy team, or you're not going to go after criminals, bad people. You're going to create a good team. And so that's my favorite book. So whether you're corporate or in the field, Managing from the Heart is good.
I love it.
And it's good training. So use that book and then create a training curriculum for your event, because it's great for that. So,
and I gather that this book is potentially great for both leaders in the field as much as leaders of teams in corporate, right?
Exactly. Both sides. Yeah.
Love it. Okay. So next question, if you could have a superpower, any superpower, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I thought about that question, and my first response was not to age.
Oh, I love that.
So, stop and whatever, but that's not a superpower.
That reminds me of that movie, The Age of Adeline, which actually looks like it's a great movie. If you haven't watched it, watch it.
Right,
but at the same time, I feel like that would be torture at a point.
It is, because all your friends pass away, and then at the end,
and your kids, everything,
yeah. But I knew that was not possible, so I would say
I didn't say it had to be a possible superpower.
Right. So be visible.
Invisible.
Then I could, just go into meetings, whatever.
Like, how would you use that? I just imagine kind of going into the locker room at that. Yeah, anyway. So be a fly on the wall at meetings. I love that. You could really think up some cool places you could be and meetings you could listen to. I think, political meetings, all sorts of fun things there, right?
Go to the White House and totally.
Yeah. Be a fly on the wall there, right? And okay, so next question, what's your favorite quote?
Well, my favorite quote is, I say it to myself all throughout the day, is when, because sometimes you have stressful days, and I find I'm kind of back to back to back, and I stop and I breathe and I say, breathe in faith, and breathe out fear, because you want to get that fear out and bring that faith in. So I breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, and then go to my next call. So
yeah. Yeah, I love that. Such a good little reminder. Very powerful, very powerful.
Yeah.
And last question, my absolute favorite question is, if you could go back in time and say one thing to your past self, what would that be?
I often wonder, and I see, young, gorgeous young girls walking around and just say, whoa, keep those beautiful legs, and, all these things that people told me. And I go, what are you talking about? And just watch out, you're going to age. But I would say, hold on to a sense of confidence, because as a young person, I think you're still creating that confidence. And I love Jane Fonda, and she says, now that she's older, she could give a what on what anybody would say about her. She's just got that confidence level. She could conquer the world. And so I would go back and say, be confident.
Yeah, that's a great one. And you know what's so powerful, because at the end of the day, we're always looking for the next thing. And I feel like as we're growing up, we're always looking forward to getting older and the next phase and the next phase. And you're looking forward, but you very rarely stopped. And I kind of wish as a teen I had stopped and enjoyed what I was experiencing then, because I was never going to experience that again. I was never going to get to, go through that process of the body changes, and you hated that. Every teen, I'm watching my teens going through it now, and I think I wish I'd enjoyed that time and actually experienced it, because now I look back and I think things are very different now.
Exactly.
You're right. Aging isn't a bad thing, but it's a reminder that you can't experience that moment in time again. And I think that's where I find aging hard is you look back and you think, I wish I'd been in that moment. I wish I'd just enjoyed that moment in time just a little longer.
And be in the now. I think as children or teenagers or young adults, so you would say that to them, they go, what? And I think as we get older, we think about that more. But there are things I wish we kind of learned in school, but just standard, kind of business sense, just things. But, who knows how other people would react. I would have loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. Less algebra, more relationship building would have been great.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really great chatting with you, Michele. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day from all the way on the other side of the globe. So thank you so much for joining me and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom about the industry. Your passion is really infectious, and I'm really grateful for you today. So thank you.
Well, and thank you, Sam. And, I do have some leaders I'd love you to interview, because I do believe they have a lot to share, and we don't always give them that chance, that platform. But I hope that everyone out there that listens, I'm on LinkedIn, reach out if you ever have any questions. I work as hard as I can to be half sales field, half corporate. I never want to go over to one side. I just always want to see both sides, and hold on to that field pass that I have. And thank you for your time and letting me do this. So
such a pleasure. I think it's so amazing for us to be out, and really for me the passion behind this podcast, for those that are wondering, she's brings all sorts of different people in, but the thing for me is that this is such a powerful, impactful industry, and I want there to be more understanding around not just what it does, but the depth. You were talking about the breadth and the depth of this industry. There are so many opportunities within it, but there's also so much incredible knowledge and history as well. And to be able to open some eyes to that, give people a little bit more of an understanding around it, and keep this beautiful industry not just alive, but thriving, for me, will be such an amazing thing. And I can see lots of incredible opportunity as we go forward. And I'd love for people to grab that. So thank you again, Michele. It's been great chatting with a like-minded, passionate person who loves this industry as much as I do. And thank you, of course, to our beautiful listeners for tuning in again this week. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, of course, so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. And if you loved this episode, share it with a friend. But thank you again so much, Michele. It's been great chatting with you.
Sure. See you soon. Okay. Thank you, Sam.
See you, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. If you love listening and you found that this was helpful for your direct selling business, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check out the recommended video that's popped up on your screen right here. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye for now.